In Pursuit of Truth Theatre presents.
Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth Theatre. I am your host, Sir Patrick Mack of Maplethorpe. As the Deep State and the Q Team continue their standoff over the border security of our great land, it appears the war of words has escalated. Oh, the wicked humanity! If only we were aware of how cruel and hurtful our words truly could be. And it is times like this, times of chaos, in which the common man cannot help but wonder as to the health of Supreme Court Justice and Chief Snollygoster Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There have been reports by some that she is indeed well and with a healthy constitution, while others have reported a less vibrant state.
All right, well, we are going to talk a little bit about Darth Vader's health, but let's get on these Q posts. How many we got, John?
9.
Nice, let's get to work.
Yeah.
26:53, 32 minutes after the hour of 12. RBG being Ruth Darth Bader Ginsburg. Why was she selected? Who appointed her? Well, that was Bill Clinton. And, I suppose why was she selected? I guess back in 93 when she took the oath of office, I imagine people just thought it was to serve on the Supreme Court, right? Uphold our Constitution. We're going to look a little into her on this post here. Remember her history, and we've got her in brackets. Now, back in the day, Q used to call these things kill box. Is she in a kill box? We're going to find out. Reference 230-page book called Sex Bias in the U.S. Code. And there you're looking at it right there. Published in 1977 by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Now, we're not going to read that book because nobody got time for that, but we're going to go through some of the highlights. Yeah, some of the all-star moments. Called for the sex integration of prisons and reformatories so that conditions of imprisonment, security, and housing could be equal. Okay. She explained that the grand design of such institutions is to prepare inmates for return to the community as persons equipped to benefit from and contribute to civil society. Then perpetuation of single-sex institutions should be rejected. Wow, I see. Okay, well, that seems to be a great way to get people ready for the real world, is to make things easier on them. Called for the sex integration of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts because they perpetuate stereotyped sex roles. Insisted on sex integrating college fraternity and sorority chapters and replacing them with college social societies. Cast constitutional doubt on the legality of Mother's Day and Father's Day as separate holidays.
Honestly, every time I try to do something fun, you make it not that way.
Yeah, Bader, you're no fun. Glad you're not my grandmother's mother. Called for reducing the age of consent for sexual acts to people who are less than 12 years old.
God, please, no! No!
Asserted that laws against bigamous persons cohabiting with more than one woman and women cohabiting with a bigamist are unconstitutional. Objected to laws against prostitution because prostitution as a consensual act between adults is arguably within the zone of privacy protected by recent constitutional decisions. Ginsburg wrote that the Mann Act, which punishes those who engage in interstate sex traffic of women and girls, is offensive. Such acts should be considered within the zone of privacy.
Why are you the way that you are?
Demanded that we firmly reject, draft, or combat exemption for women, stating women must be subject to the draft if men are. But, she added, the need for affirmative action and for transition measures is particularly strong in the uniformed services. An indefatigable censor, Ginsburg listed hundreds of sexist words that must be eliminated from all statutes. Among words she found offensive were, are you ready? Hang on, get the children out of the room. Man, woman, man-made, mankind, husband, wife, mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, serviceman, longshoreman, postmaster, watchman, seamanship, and to man a vessel. Pages 15 through 16. Wow. So, Knucklehead, what do you propose we do? Wanted he, she, him, her, his, and hers to be dropped down the memory hole. They must be replaced by he, she, her, him, and her, his. So, wait a minute. You have to put the slash in there when you say it. Her, him, her, his. You could have done better. And federal statutes must use the bad grammar of plural constructions to avoid third-person singular pronouns. Okay, so now we're screwing all these words up, throwing them down the memory hole, and using bad grammar. I draw the line. Condemned the Supreme Court's ruling in Harris versus McCrae and claimed that taxpayer-funded abortions should be a constitutional right. And then we get this link right here. This link goes to Human Events. This is an article from back in 2005. Senators overlooked radical record of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it essentially just goes through a lot of the talking points, as you can see right here, the ones that we're covering on the Q post. Well, who are the doctors currently treating Ruth Bader Ginsburg? What other political, former, current, senior political heads are they affiliated with? What off-market drugs are being provided to Ruth Bader in order to sustain minimum daily function? Okay, look, when your health is at the state that the best that people are hoping for is minimum daily function, it might be time to mail it in, right? What is the real medical diagnosis of Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Who is managing her care? Who is really managing her care? The clock is ticking. Panic, panic, panic in D.C. Well, let's take a look at this. Who are the doctors currently treating Ruth Bader Ginsburg? This is according to CNBC. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 85, undergoes lung procedure to remove cancerous growth. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg undergoes surgery to remove 2 malignant nodules from her left lung, the Supreme Court says. She was resting comfortably at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York after the surgery. Say that 10 times fast. Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. There was no evidence of disease elsewhere in Ginsburg's body, and no further treatment is planned, the court said. The nodules were discovered during tests to treat rib fractures she sustained in a fall last month, the statement says. God, dog, so she's treating rib fractures and they find nodules and she's still kicking around. Good Lord. I think this woman's immortal, just like Yoda. And like Yoda, she also uses bad grammar. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg underwent surgery Friday to remove 2 malignant nodules from her left lung. Okay, so they were treating her ribs. They ended up finding these nodules. What I found was curious down here. It says Ginsburg did not miss any oral arguments because of her injury. God, dog, Bader's a linebacker. All right, so she's being treated at this Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And I got to looking at that. I found their annual report from, 2017. And I was looking at some of the donors down here at page 90. And we see the Koch brothers. How about that? So these are some of the people that are supplying money to this center. And I found lots of names. These are very, very small. We're not going to go through a ton of these. Rockefeller, JP Morgan, I found. What else did we see here? Goldman Sachs. There you go. Lots of big name donors here. Hey, how about the V Foundation for Cancer Research?
You can get all amped up on V and do all kinds of weird things.
Stop it, Shep. Trying to work. Looks like the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center had a cancer community summit. Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Community Summit. Responding to Vice President Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden's call to action. In order to double the rate of progress in cancer prevention, treatment, and care, we will be joining a national effort on September 21st to host a Biden Cancer Community Summit. Good. So Joe Biden also cares about cancer. All right. I noticed this curious doctor too, Sir Murray F. Brennan. It looks like he's out of New Zealand. Dr. Murray Brennan is an oncologist, surgeon, scientist. He was chair of the Department of Surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center from 1985 to June 2006 and served as vice president of international programs and director of the Bobst International Center from 2010 to 2018. Okay, pretty accomplished guy. Wanted to point out down here at the bottom, in January 2015, he was appointed by Her Majesty the Queen as Knight Grand Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit. That sounds like a good old boy group right there. Hey, when you need a friend, when you really need a friend, you don't need a buddy, you don't need a wingman, you need a best friend. And I'm not just talking about a best friend, I'm talking about champion of all best friends, the best of the best friends. You need a grand companion. Murray's your guy, Murray Brennan. Yep. Okay, well, we can only speculate as to what kind of treatment she is actually receiving or what's actually wrong with this woman in the first place, but I'm pretty sure we can all gather that whatever it is likely light years ahead of anything that you or I would ever be able to receive, right? They don't want to give us the real drugs. They want to keep us sick in the first place. So their drugs just keep perpetuating the sickness or creating new ones so that they can sell us new drugs for those, right? Meanwhile, they got Bader in a hyperbaric chamber, probably shooting her up full of V.
You can get all amped up on V and do all kinds of weird things.
Nobody cares, Shep. Well, we don't really know, right? Who is managing her care? Well, they're saying she's in the hospital. Who is really managing her care? Who knows? Is the Q team already taking advantage of this situation? Is this a done deal already? Do we have another John McCain situation? Another George Bush Sr. situation in which they might have already clocked out at halftime and we're just watching the mascot do the rest? Who knows? Q says the clock is ticking. Panic, panic, panic in DC. So it seems to me like Q is letting us know that somebody's time is up, and I have a feeling that's already the case. Let's move on for now. Post 2654, 6 minutes after the hour, 1 p.m. We get this Axios link right here. Trump says appointing acting cabinet heads grants more flexibility. President Trump told reporters outside the White House on Sunday that he's in no hurry to replace his acting cabinet secretaries with formal replacements, saying, "I have acting, and my actings are doing really great. I sort of like acting. It gives me more flexibility. Do you understand that? Why it matters." Trump's Attorney General, Secretary of Defense, and Interior, EPA head, and UN ambassador are all working in acting capacities, despite being Senate-confirmed positions. The appointment of Matthew Whitaker as acting attorney general in particular came under fire as potentially unconstitutional, even from conservative legal scholars like John Yoo. And the Washington Post reported this week that Patrick Shanahan's position as acting defense secretary could also be constitutionally murky. Furthermore, Trump, who campaigned on draining the swamp, faced criticism for his acting secretary's lobbying ties. Okay, now I want to point something out in this article that they're talking about, particularly with Matthew Whitaker, as being potentially unconstitutional. Okay, remember that, please. So, Q says Scaramucci model, and of course that's Anthony Scaramucci, who was acting, I guess, if you will. Public opinion, optics do not matter. Temps can be very dangerous to those who are targeting. Yeah, look, as far as public opinion goes at this point, it's very clear that President Trump does not care, right? Sits there with his arms folded. He could care less. He's dealt with 2 years of nothing but hate from the mainstream media. He's already used to it. At this point, he's already drawn his lines in the sand, and he's going to stay right where he's at. So as far as optics goes, it really doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is he only seems to get more popular as mainstream media and, of course, the unhinged left starts to lose popularity, because all they're really doing is freaking out over whatever it is. Whatever he chooses, they choose the opposite, and it doesn't take very long to figure out that model either. As far as temps go, the way I'm looking at this is it seems to give him a lot of flexibility, and I think he's gotten a lot of advisement on this. I liken it to a good sports team, whether you like whatever sport you like. I particularly like basketball. Some guys come in and they're shooters, but they can't handle the ball. Other people can handle the ball, but they can't shoot. You got guys who can't do either, but they can get rebounds, they can pull the ball down and give it to other people. You see what I'm saying? Good teams have good role players. And sometimes those guys got to come off the bench, right? They can't always be starters. You can only have 5 guys on a basketball team at one time. And it's kind of like this with, I think, what we're seeing with President Trump. He's working within this framework of sort of this constant flushing out of different members. Now, I think in the beginning, what they were trying to do is kind of flush out some of the leakers, which eventually started to subside. But we've seen how deep this really, really runs, and that's been difficult. So that's part of the reason for a lot of this coming and going, if you will. But I also think that using this acting principle, I have a feeling he's getting some advisement, likely, I think, from Alan Dershowitz in regards to the constitutionality of all of this. But it definitely seems to be keeping the deep state on their toes. In regards to Whitaker, maybe he's only there to drop bombs, and then he goes right back to sit on the bench. You see how this is all going, right? Let's move on to 2655. 34 minutes after the hour, 1 p.m. How many authorized FISA umbrella surveillance warrants targeting those who illegally targeted, and then we've got a blank inside brackets here, are currently active? Upstream collection can be very revealing when you no longer control the levers of power. That's his FVEY is for Five Eyes, referring to the Five Eyes Alliance. Buckle and cooperate in order to preserve and maintain their future. Germany losing stranglehold on EU. The future will not repeat the past. The clock is ticking. Q. Well, I'm not exactly sure how many authorized FISA umbrella surveillance warrants targeting those who illegally targeted are currently active. Not really sure. Could it be that anybody who ended up in these brackets were active? Who knows? Maybe through all these Q posts, anybody who ever fell in between these brackets has a FISA out on them. Remember, FISA works both ways. Just because they used it illegally to spy on Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and of course, eventually Trump under that umbrella, that doesn't mean that legal FISAs aren't out there currently too, targeting lots of these deep state knuckleheads. So you tell me, maybe it has to do with the number of spaces here too that Q is alluding to. I was kind of thinking that maybe anybody who fell within those brackets could be a candidate. Q says upstream collection can be very revealing. Yes, I'm supposed it can. Upstream collection is basically the direct source of information, right? Whether you're getting it from their phones or their computers or whatever it is. When you no longer control the levers of power, do Five Eye allies buckle and cooperate in order to preserve and maintain their future? Well, yeah, I imagine so. And I imagine that's what leads you to the next sentence here. Germany losing stranglehold on EU. Yeah, keep in mind, Merkel was supposed to be the big thing, and she's going to be stepping down now. She's held a lot of influence. And we've talked in past videos about her lineage. If you're not familiar with that, I highly suggest you give that a little look. You'll turn up some interesting things. But she was definitely their golden girl, right? She was going to usher them into the golden age of socialism. And she was sort of taking an alpha role in this EU procedure. But it looks like that is all falling apart now, right? And of course, you can just call it nationalism if you want. But the fact of the matter is that people are tired of being taxed to death. And they are tired of open border policies. They're tired of not seeing their own country being taken care of at the expense. So this is not going to work out well for socialism at the end of the day. And as far as I'm concerned, this Five Eyes Alliance, and if you're not familiar with that, they are five countries essentially that were all spying on each other for each other. You can't spy on your own country, so you just kind of work within this little group. And that was Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. They were all spying on each other and just sharing information. And of course, that's how Clinton was grabbing a lot of her information illegally. That's how a lot of this got compiled for the Steele dossier, but it was all outside the official Five Eyes Alliance. Well, this whole alliance is sketchy to begin with. So it seems to me like it's pretty much it's a losing battle for these guys. So the only thing to do is to cooperate. Look, New Zealand does not want to go to war over the U.S., right? Australia does not want to go to war with the U.K. These are formidable foes and could cause a lot of damage. And the information that was probably shared in these Five Eye groups are very, very damaging. So rather than do that, it's easier to buckle and cooperate and basically sell out. And that's probably what led to the stepping down of Angela Merkel. Who knows what they had on her, but we likely got some information from the Five Eyes Alliance, or at least that's what I'm gathering from Q's narrative here. The future will not repeat the past. And once again, Q says the clock is ticking. Let's move on to the next post, 2656. 39 minutes after the hour, 1 p.m., we get this Twitter link right here. Q says, Anon's new. What did we know? President Trump says, I may declare a national emergency depending on what's going to happen on the next few days.
I may declare a national emergency dependent on what's going to happen over the next few days. We have a meeting, Vice President Pence, and a group will be going to a certain location that you know where that is, and they'll be having another meeting. I don't expect to have anything happen at that meeting, but I think we'll have, nor does the vice president, but I think we're going to have some very serious talk come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We have to have border security. If we don't have border security, we're going to be crime-ridden, and it's going to get worse and worse.
Okay, well, there you have it. President Trump laying it out on the line. And of course, Anons did know this. We've been talking about this for quite some time. We've talked about the omnibus. We've talked about the spending bill. We knew all about the wall. So we knew that this whole shutdown was for a very important reason. And President Trump is now calling it out for everyone. We are dealing with a serious issue of national security. And we're not just talking about this migrant caravan down south from Honduras. We are talking about lots of things. We're talking about finally dropping some bacony, cheesy goodness. And of course, Anons knew this. And this is the only way to get it done, is to finally let everybody know what an actual emergency this really is. So I think while a lot of people are in a panic about President Trump's comments, we knew all along. And one Anon who knew all along is Leslie Justice, who always seems to have perfect timing getting her tweet right under President Trump's tweet. So to you, Leslie Justice, you are the real G.
Still doing that, Andre?
Post 2657, 9 minutes after the hour, 3 p.m. When will the public discover that Ted Cruz was also illegally surveilled pre-POTUS Republican nomination? Let me guess. It's going to be on Hannity, and it'll be Sarah Carter. CIA illegal surveillance members of Congress, CIA illegal surveillance members of the press, CIA illegal surveillance members of Senate Intel Committee, and of course the CIA no longer with their intelligence. Well, I think we all knew this was going on. Then it takes us to a couple links right here. And these are pretty long articles. The first one is from The Guardian. Pretty interesting story about this Daniel Jones, who was kind of trying to blow the whistle on this. Here, it says right here, Jones, a former FBI counterterrorism analyst, wanted to testify. The CIA had pushed him past the point where he could back down. Its lies documented in a 6,700-page secret report, which Jones was constantly rewriting that winter, were compounding to Congress, to Barack Obama, to George W. Bush, to the press, to the public. The lies were not random misstatements. They were directional in the service of covering up the brutality of what it did to at least 119 terrorist suspects, some clearly innocent. It held in a global network of secret prisons. Okay, so Jones, like they say here, was on the verge of exposing the cover-up, and he was checking this all out, and he actually wanted to testify, and they were encouraging him not to. He kept having to rewrite all these documents, and then he would go back there with the CIA, and he would actually draw on his little whiteboard and show them how their story wasn't working out, and they just weren't wanting him to go for that. And then this ends up talking about these hearings that were on December 17th. No. The CIA sent its choice for its next top attorney, Carolyn Crass, to the committee for a nomination hearing, and I highly suggest giving this a listen. It's about an 8-minute video, but essentially what's going on here is that the CIA was like, yeah, we're essentially spying on everybody, but we just wanted to do that to make sure that we're all good, right? And this had to do with how a lot of these prisoners were being tortured and whatnot. There was a lot of things being covered up, and when they were actually trying to kind of audit this whole thing and really see what was going on, everybody was offering up these conflicting stories. And then we get this article from 2014, the New York Times, basically saying the same thing. And let me just read this first paragraph. An internal investigation by the CIA has found that its officers penetrated a computer network used by the Senate Intelligence Committee in preparing its damning report on CIA's detention and interrogation program. Okay, so looks like there was some torture going on. They didn't really want to talk about how this was all going on, and a lot of information. Everybody was pretty much being spied on. The Obama administration had Brennan essentially spying on everyone. When the CIA's monitoring of the committee became public in March, after months of private meetings and growing bitterness, Ms. Feinstein took to the Senate floor to deliver a blistering speech accusing the agency of infringing on the committee's role as an overseer. Calling it a defining moment in the committee's history, Ms. Feinstein said that how the matter was resolved will show whether the Intelligence Committee can be effective in monitoring and investigating our nation's intelligence activities, or whether our work can be thwarted by those we oversee. Hours later, Mr. Brennan was publicly questioned about the dispute and said that when the facts come out on this, I think a lot of people who are claiming that there has been this tremendous sort of spying and monitoring and hacking will be proved wrong. Well, there was a tremendous amount of spying and monitoring and hacking. That's indeed what happened. Pretty much anyone that could be spied on was being spied on. And if you'll remember, Hillary Clinton had access to pretty much everything as long as Mueller was feeding it to her. So these guys had literally everything. This was all part of Five Eyes 2, who ordered the surveillance. Well, I would imagine at some point it all goes back to Barack Obama. What justification was provided to authorize surveillance of elected officials? Well, it was this whole collusion story that they had to kind of drum up, right? Surveillance fall under scope of FISA warrant or internal to department or outsourced to Five Eyes. Well, I think we probably get the idea there. Five Eyes was a great way to skirt the NSA and go ahead and share information, and that's how all these knuckleheads were getting their information. Reality check, friend or foe, we all spy on each other. Well, I think we know that, right? We know that as long as we can get spies in someone else's country, we're going to spy on them and they're going to do the same to us. That's how it's played. Should we be spying on ourselves? Not so much. That's what turned out to happen. Should we be tasking others to spy on ourselves in order to avoid U.S. law? No, I don't think so. That's why I think we should dissolve this whole Five Eyes business. Was Five Eyes established and designed by the Intel Committee as a back channel surveillance apparatus to avoid domestic laws, triggers, and congressional Senate oversight? Precisely. We saw what happened with oversight right here. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of glossing over these stories. They're really big stories, but they're rather long. But we saw how this happened. No one got prosecuted. The DOJ didn't go after anybody. They didn't seem to mind. What key logs exist to monitor Five Eyes intel collection? Well, I imagine there's probably tons of key logs. You go over there and you enter your little key and you've got access to whatever you want. As a matter of fact, in Hillary's case, she could get it sent to a remote access server. What ability do former government officials have regarding ability to access C-level Five Eyes offshore data? I imagine being classified. Well, they just go over there and they're part of this key. They're whitelisted to something or whatever it might be. They probably have some sort of access key and they can get it wherever they want. But if they really want to go to the source, they just go over there to like New Zealand. When Clinton went over to New Zealand, she was likely going over there to grab and probably sell information. How did HRC gain access to the highest classification special access programs, closed system access, and able to transfer to remote home service? Likely through Five Eyes, right? Q above should scare every single American. Yeah, these were all our secrets. These were special access programs. We're talking about space programs. We're talking about Air Force programs. We're talking about all kinds of serious things. How did China locate primary CIA assets within China? 187. Money buys power. Well, I'm sure they figured out who ended up was buying stuff from Hillary Clinton. And if you remember, some of these spies, they were killed. It was about 10 of them, I think. They were all off. This was around 2010. No punishment. Brennan by Hussein administration regarding surveillance of Senate, etc. Yeah, why not? Because they needed him to go out to CNN and leak everything. They were all in on it. Everybody was in on it. Logical thinking, why? And then we get this article right here. Takes you to a 2014 article from McClatchy. When you don't want to read real news, Justice declines to pursue allegations that CIA monitored Senate intel staff. Essentially the same thing we were just saying here. The Justice Department has decided not to pursue accusations that the CIA spied on the Senate Intelligence Committee and allegations that committee staff slipped classified documents from a secure agency facility, McClatchy has confirmed. Yeah, so no prosecution, right? Justice Department declines to pursue. Of course, the Justice Department was all corrupt. That's why we got rid of them first. Fake news media limits exposure to public. Yeah, they didn't make much of a big deal out of it. Obviously, the hearings were kind of going on, but other than that, CNN wasn't talking about it. NBC wasn't talking about it. Nobody was really talking about it, and many Americans just let it go. When did Snowden breach NSA and publicly release cripple intel gathering ability? NSA, I believe that was June 2013. NSA targeted? Yeah, essentially, I believe that, Well, let me just read this here. Where did Snowden work prior to NSA contractor except? Well, he was a CIA clown, right? And the way I look at it is it looks to me like he was a clown that was implanted into the NSA to kind of hamstring their ability to go ahead and surveil. And that's how we got this Five Eyes. That's how we got this, what eventually ended up into a Christopher Steele, dossier. But this essentially started this whole thing. They wanted to skirt the NSA, and outwardly it looked like he was a whistleblower. He was calling out this PRISM and Keyscore. He was letting everybody know they were being spied on. And essentially that was true, but he was also tipping the black hats too. At least that's the way that I look at it. Well, what senior level government CIA official recommended at Snowden for NSA contractor off TAR position? That would have been John Brennan. Remember, he was former advisor of Homeland Security, right? Post public release of classified NSA pro Uranium One. Yeah, this was all right around the same time. So they needed to go ahead and get this Uranium One deal outside of NSA collection. So what better way to send some young whippersnapper over there to China, send them all over the world, and then he comes out and lets everybody know how it's done. He was essentially, like I said, hamstringing the NSA's ability to collect any of this detail, and that's why all these key logs were kept over there in New Zealand or whatnot. Where is Snowden today? Well, who knows? Looks to me like he's probably in Russia. What country was involved in Uranium One? Russia was involved in Uranium One. Canada was involved in Uranium One. If real target country was Venezuela or Ecuador, why didn't Snowden take a direct flight from Hong Kong to those locations? Yeah, good question. He was already there in China. If he needed to go to down to Venezuela or Ecuador, he needs to go a completely different route. Instead, he went to Russia. How many direct flights run daily from Hong Kong to Venezuela and Ecuador? I'm not sure, but probably enough that he can catch one or he can catch an indirect flight, either way. But it looks to me like he wanted to go ahead and drop this, whatever he needed to drop outside of Russia, and then his plan all along was to get to Russia. If Snowden was CIA, NSA, would he not understand simple logic? Going public prior to end destination safety would limit active passport travel ability due to blocking and deregulations. Yeah, exactly. Why was he allowed to travel? It's because he was probably already there. He knew once he dropped the bomb, they were going to be after him. He's not stupid. Why wouldn't Snowden publicly release info after he was safely at final destination? Because that would have directly implicated Russia, and that would have started a world war. Why then would Snowden route through Russia? Was Russia final destination? Yeah, likely. Was Russia true destination? Very, very likely, yeah. Could Snowden be seen releasing classified programs intel from inside of Russia? No, that would have made him look to be the traitor that he essentially was. But instead, he needed to look like a whistleblower. What role did Brennan play in the Snowden leaks regarding NSA? Well, he was the one that recommended him. He's the one that got him all set up. What was Brennan's background regarding Saudi Arabia? He was a CIA station chief there in Riyadh. As a matter of fact, I always want to rememberize that he was the one who signed off on all the he expedited essentially the visas and the passports for the 19 hijackers during 9/11. Brennan was a true traitor, so of course Snowden was his boy. Does the CIA hold blackmail on political leaders? Likely. That's what a lot of these insurance policies essentially are, right? And that's why this ran so deep. Because to be honest with you, most of these people wouldn't have probably known it. They're young. They want to affect their government in a probably positive way. They get into government. Next thing they see, DC works just like this. You're on the blackmail list, and now you're playing ball for the rest of your life, or it's you or your family. Does the CIA protect those who protect them? Yeah, essentially, it's a good old boy network, right? Why are ex-CIA contractors running for office? Well, because they know very well that they are indeed implicated in all this spying and the actual real collusion, right? And they need to make sure that doesn't happen. So if they run for office, like we've talked about before, then essentially, if it comes out there's allegations against them or something like that, they can throw their hands up in the air and say, hey, this is just a political witch hunt. You're just going after me because I'm an opposition. When the factor is, no, we're going after you because you're an ex-CIA contractor knucklehead that sold us out. How many ex-CIA contractors are currently in office? Probably quite a few. And let's talk about one. Hello, Adam Schiff. Once an agent, always an agent Q. Well, that's news to me. I always thought Schiff was just a lawyer, but it most certainly is not a surprise, right? After all, clowns are everywhere, and all it takes is a simple Wikipedia search, and we can find out a little bit about Schiff's clownington actions. Let's go back to intelligence and surveillance reform. Schiff has been a prominent supporter of surveillance reforms, especially in the wake of the leaks of classified intelligence by Edward Snowden. In 2007, in response to disclosure of the terrorist surveillance program, Schiff and Representative Jeff Flake offered a successful amendment in the House of Representatives to clarify that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is the exclusive means for collecting foreign intelligence information within the United States. Yeah, he didn't mention whether they would do it legally or not. Schiff has been a critic of the bulk collection of telephone metadata by the NSA. In January 2014, Schiff introduced the Telephone Metadata Reform Act, which would prohibit the bulk collection of domestic phone records. Schiff has also introduced several bills aimed at reforming the FISA court, including a bill to require outside counsel to be appointed to argue for privacy and civil liberties protections in certain cases before the courts. Now let's talk about Benghazi. Schiff was appointed to the House Select Committee on Benghazi in 2014 by Nancy Pants Pelosi to serve as one of the 5 Democrats on the committee. Schiff had participated in the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence investigation into the attacks on Benghazi diplomatic compound, which found that the initial talking points provided by the intelligence community were flawed, but without an intention to deceive, and that diplomatic facilities across the world lacked adequate security. The report's findings were unanimous and bipartisan. Before he was appointed as a member of the Benghazi Select Committee, Schiff called the establishment of a select committee to investigate the 2012 attack a colossal waste of time, and said Democratic leaders should not appoint any members, stating, "I think it's just a tremendous red herring and a waste of taxpayers' resources." Despite those reservations, he still accepted an appointment to the committee because if he felt he could add value, he would serve. Thanks so much for your service there, Adam Schiff. But let's talk about collusion real quick. On April 2nd, 2017, right now, Schiff, the ranking member on the House Select Intelligence Committee, which is tasked with conducting inquiries related to Russian interference in the 2016 United States election, appeared on CNN's State of the Union. In the wide-ranging interview, Schiff and host, of course, this is out of my range here, Jake Tapper, discussed Michael Flynn's request for immunity, Schiff's and Devin Nunes' separate inspections of White House documents, Trump allegations of wiretapping in Trump Tower, and Nunes' apparent close association with the Trump White House. Tapper asked Schiff if there was evidence of Donald Trump-Russia collusion. Schiff replied, "I don't think we can say anything definitively at this point. We are still at the very early stage of the investigation. The only thing I can say is that it would be irresponsible for us not to get to the bottom of this." Tapper asked, "Do you think that Chairman Nunes was part of an attempt to provide some sort of cover-up for the president's claim about Obama wiretapping him at Trump Tower, which obviously this does not prove, but to cover for that, or an attempt to distract, as you're suggesting?" Schiff replied, "It certainly is an attempt to distract and hide the origin of the materials, to hide the White House hand. The question is, of course, why? And I think the answer to that question is this effort to point the Congress in other directions. Basically say, don't look at me, don't look at Russia. There is nothing to see here." A few days later, Nunes recused himself as leader of the investigative panel, while the White House Committee on Ethics investigated whether he had disclosed classified information. Okay, well, this is Wikipedia stuff. You can read the rest for yourself here, but it kind of paints a picture, eh? And it looks kind of all along where Schiff is supposed to be kind of this on the fence dude, making sure that everything's cool. Yeah, we're going to talk about reform. We're going to make sure that we get to the bottom of this, but we don't want to collect all this information from people, that are in our own country. But it's all good to do it as long as they're outside of the United States. And so we're just going to use that premise and we're going to spy on everybody. But meanwhile, I'm going to look like the good guy in the outer narrative. Sounds like some clown action to me. Let's move on to the next post. Post 2658, 57 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. Remember when Democrats and the fake news media, I guess we're calling them fake, would now, we got a plus, I'm guessing that means the Soros fake media, and it looks like they're in brackets, pushed mass fear that POTUS would start World War III regarding North Korea. Yeah, it was just not long ago, wasn't it? POTUS, peace on the Korean Peninsula. No further missile tests or uranium enrichment. Yeah, no one's wanting to talk about that. They'll only talk every once in a while when they think that it might be flaring up again. They kind of try and create this narrative that there's tensions there. But overall, we've seen no missiles from Rocket Man. New narrative gets created. Refusal to provide coverage of successes. Yeah, anything that gets done well gets no coverage at all. Remember when Democrats and the fake news media, fake would, pushed a stock market collapse if POTUS was elected. POTUS was elected and the policies equal to the largest gains recorded in market history. New narrative created. So we get another POTUS win. We go on to the next narrative. I think you get the idea. Refusal to provide coverage of successes. Use Fed to increase rates to counter growth and project POTUS blame. Yeah, as soon as everything gets going, the Fed decides to crank the rates up. That way everyone has another reason to blame POTUS, and that's exactly what they do. Remember when Democrats and the fake news media, fake would, pushed complete economic collapse if POTUS was elected? Yeah, that didn't happen. POTUS elected, and those policies equal to the lowest unemployment records in history, plus record jobs and GDP growth. New narrative created. Refusal to provide coverage of successes. Deploy and use racism, sexism, and any other ism to counter potential black, Hispanic popular support. Yeah, because we know that as soon as that happens, then there's no longer any kind of minority going on. It just seems like everybody's pretty much down with it. It's hard to say that minorities aren't feeling it if they're feeling it. You tell me. You feeling it? I'm feeling it. Let's go. Why do Democrats and the fake news media, fake would, continually push the impeach narrative if impeachment requires 2/3 of the Senate vote to enact odds of that? Because they're desperate. It's fourth quarter. They don't have anything else. That's the first thing we've heard out of the mouths of some of these new congressmen. They're like, well, that's the first thing we're going to do. Because they don't have any plans. They don't have any politics. They didn't think that far. They weren't supposed to be losing in the first place. Did they push this fake narrative to project a supposed supportable with evidence wrongdoing to their base? No, they do it because they're all butthurt. Confirmation bias, that's precisely what it is. As long as everybody believes it, let's go ahead and run with it. Accusations never supported by facts? Well, we're still waiting on them. Group think. That's precisely what the Democratic Party is. That's precisely what a lot of socialism is, communism is. The list goes on and on. Panic in D.C. Why? What was lost? The power of the purse was lost. And that's a big power. Because when you have that purchasing power, you can buy opinions, right? You can buy the news. You can buy whatever you need. You can buy loyalty in some cases. Commander-in-Chief of the United States military. Power to replace senior officials within crucial government positions, departments, who can then replace senior, mid, low positions. Trickle-down replacement. Power to appoint Supreme Court justices. And we've talked about this at great lengths, right? The DOJ needed to get cleaned out first. And then it needed to be the FBI. It needed to be the CIA. We can't prosecute crimes if we've got corrupt prosecutors. We can't try crimes if we've got poor judges. And we most certainly can't even begin to investigate crimes if we don't have good investigators. And so you got to get that out from the top, the root of the weed, and it all trickles down, right? What if Hillary Rodham Clinton won and appointed 2 crooked Supreme Court justices? We would have been done. Look at the knucklehead we were just talking about. Listen to all those things that Bader wants to do. The last resort. Power to directly undo Hussein's previous EOs, which harm greatly limited the U.S. in many vital NEC ways. Power to rebuild the United States military back to a global superpower. China payoffs, bribes, failure. Power to enact laws by EO to combat and protect our people. Power to shift foreign policy, thereby reducing our enemy's ability to prosper and someday reign. God, dog cues going into caps lock here. Iran deal, Paris Accord, China trade, Syria. It looks like we got 22 of these dots here. Power to declass crucial docs to provide the public with the truth, transparency. Power to give back power to the people as intended by our founders. Leader of the free world. Are we giving another rub to Adam Schiff here? And then we've got 21 dots, I believe. So could we be talking about documents? And we've got another one about to drop. You tell me. Let's move on. Post 2659, 30 minutes after the hour of 7 p.m. We get this article right here from Real Clear Politics. Dershowitz, secret emails about underage sex allegations will put prominent people in handcuffs. In an interview Thursday morning with Good Day New York, Alan Dershowitz pushed back against allegations that he had sex with underage girls through billionaire convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He said he is being framed and has emails that will put prominent people in handcuffs. There are emails so far that are secret, but that prove not only that I was framed, but who framed me, Dershowitz said. It names names. These people are going to jail once these emails come out because this was a total frame up for financial reasons, and I can prove it and will prove it. Have me back on the show show when the emails come out. Boy, it'll be so interesting because there will be prominent people in handcuffs. Prominent people in handcuffs once these emails come out. Look, as to the first woman who accused me, her own lawyer admitted in front of witnesses that she was wrong, just wrong, that I couldn't have been in the places, he said. The second woman, he said, is a woman who wrote to the New York Post claiming that she had videotapes of Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump having sex with underage girls. The New York Post said, we don't believe you. They wouldn't help publish her story, but she's one of the people. There you go. Okay, so Alan Dershowitz, who I was referring to earlier, a constitutional lawyer, and he's advised quite a few presidents. Now, I know Alan Dershowitz is sort of a polarizing figure in a lot of arenas, but there's one thing he does know, and that is the Constitution. Now, he was also Epstein's lawyer. And if you want to know more about that story about Epstein and all the underage girls and things like that, on the island, not just underage girls, underage kids on the island, please go back to my video, In Pursuit of Truth. I think it would have been back in August 3rd, I think, called What's on the Island, where we talk a little bit about Q and the Epstein Island whole situation, whatnot. But Alan Dershowitz, who was representing Epstein, was definitely on this, what they call the Lolita Express, this plane that was going back and forth. We know that from some of the logs. However, what we don't ever see is him actually going to the island. He was on the plane, but we don't really have any logs of him going to the island. And Q has seemed to confirm that, and Q seems to be confirming Alan Dershowitz also. I think Alan Dershowitz, who is not necessarily, he's definitely not a Republican, but he is definitely a what he considers a constitutional libertarian. And like I said, he has advised many presidents, and he likes to stay that way. But he seems to have the goods. After all, if he was on that plane, he would probably know some of the people that were going to that island. Now, a lot of people are trying to say that because he was on that plane, he was going to the island too, and that's where some of these accusations come from. But he seems to have some proof, and let's hear it from his words.
Let's have a hearing. There are emails for our secret, but that prove not only that I was framed, but who framed me. It names names. These people are going to go to jail once these emails come out, because this was a total frame-up for financial reasons, and I can prove it and will prove it. Have me back on the show when the emails come out. Boy, it'll be so interesting. There'll be prominent people in handcuffs.
There's only one way to prove my innocence.
Whoa, sounds intense. Can't wait to see those emails. It's going to show exactly how long this line is going to be. Q says, get in line. Well, I think we've got a pretty good idea on some of those names because we saw some of those logs. You tell me who else you think might be on there. Let's move on for now. 2660. 59 minutes after the hour of 7 p.m. Q takes us to this Twitter link right here. And let me guess, it's our knucklehead Maggie Haberman. There is no smoking on this train. If you're found smoking, we'll assume you're on fire and take the appropriate action, said the Amtrak conductor. And Leslie Justice says, AGA.
Still doing that, Andre? Oh,
Sounds like some fighting words from Maggie Haberman there. And of course, she is the deep state pinch hitter. We talked about her yesterday and in past videos. If you haven't seen my video from yesterday, check it out to get a little bit more info on Maggie Haberman. But she's their pinch hitter. Whenever they need a story drummed up, she's the one to knock it out of the park. She's going to work for the New York Times. She's going to set the narrative and shape the narrative and kind of get everybody started. She's a deep state knucklehead. And of course, she is also implicated in the WikiLeaks emails. And that's how we sort of know this. So she's definitely got some sedition on her mind. Q claps back by saying, handler, speaking as the conductor, smoking can be bad for your health. Read the warning label, deboard train, and walk away. Once in the tunnel, there's no going back. Once in the tunnel, there's no going back. So that reminded me of something. And I picked up on obviously this is some smack talking between Maggie and Q. Maggie obviously seemed to be responding to Q's post from yesterday. Q now responding to Maggie's Twitter status. And I picked up on an Ayn Rand reference. Maybe some of you did too. I know, thanks to the Anon who sent me this next article here that agreed with me. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand, and so is the POTUS. As a matter of fact, Fountainhead is probably one of my all-time favorite books. But this seems to be a reference to her other classic book, Atlas Shrugged. Thanks to the Anon who sent me. This is a great synopsis right here. That book is Ayn Rand's semi-novel Atlas Shrugged. Now, this article is from Uncommon Wisdom Daily. It was actually in reference to a completely different story, but I think that this sums it up really nicely. The novel, which I highly recommend, and I do too, is a story of what happens when men of genius, ability, and productive virtue, men who actually move the world and who are responsible for all great achievement, decide to go on strike and remove themselves from a world that condemns, punishes, and usurps their genius. One of the novel's most compelling and philosophically important scenes involves a train disaster, one that is not merely caused by a conductor or engineer's mistake, but by a willful evasion of reality by a bureaucrat. The Taggart Comet, as the train is named, is a diesel-powered engine that breaks down on a trek through the Colorado Rockies. No replacement diesel engines are available, and the only engine nearby is a coal burner. The only problem here is that a coal-burning engine is not safe for passage through a lengthy tunnel section. The tunnel's ventilation system wasn't designed to handle the smoke emitted by a coal burner. This inconvenient fact, however, doesn't concern a prominent politician on board the Comet. Rather than respect the dictates of reality and wait for a diesel engine, the politician orders railroad employees to hook up a coal-burning engine to take the train through the tunnel. The result is the train stalls mid-tunnel, suffocating the passengers and the crew. Then an Army munitions train, unaware of the Comet's fate, barrels into the tunnel and crashes into the stalled train, detonating the armaments and causing the entire mountain to collapse from the resulting explosion. Now, the key point of the train scene in Atlas Shrugged is to illustrate how the willful rejection of reason by those who think the rules of reality don't apply to them can cause tragedy for everyone. Sadly, I see this kind of thing happening in the world on numerous fronts, affecting us all. There you go. So, thanks for that to the Anon who sent that. I thought you were right on. You're welcome to agree to disagree, but that struck me funny. And considering President Trump is also an Ayn Rand fan, this seemed like a perfect reference for this. So, Maggie, looks like your feet are being held to the fire, and you are about to have to make a slick decision. Let's move on to the next post. 2661. 27 minutes after the hour, 9 p.m., we get a few more Twitter links from Maggie Haberman. This one was from back in June 21st. People in the White House sound as confused as everyone else about what happens after the president's EO. Capitalize the president next time, Maggie. You work for the New York Times, which McGahn was against him signing. There's interagency disagreement about what it means. Trump now essentially tunes his chief of staff out. Trump driving the train, and I think what Q is pointing our attention to is that's the first time she started speaking this code about the train. Now, the second link takes us to this. And we talked about this back in November. Overheard on the Q train intercom. Attention passengers, the intercom phone is for emergencies only. It is not for asking the conductor questions. I think she's trying to clown the Q crowd, right? And like I said, we talked about this back in November. What do you got against Q, Maggie? What's your big problem? You threatened? And then Q says, a stone sits idle while the world around it evolves. Evolution, depending on the stage, can be deadly. Yeah, I suppose if you want to evolve, you've got to change a little bit too if you want to stay safe, right? Evolution, depending on the stage, can be deadly. That sounds incredibly cryptic right there. Then we get this Twitter link right here, and guess what? Once again, Maggie Haberman, and of course, this is the one we just read. There's no smoking on this train. If you're found smoking, we'll assume you're on fire and take the appropriate action, says the Amtrak conductor. And I want to once again remind you that Leslie Justice says MAGA. All right. Well, if you'll notice, Maggie Haberman has as her header passengers on a train. Looks like she is indeed trying to convey a message. Q says, we can talk through code or we can act through transparency. The choice is yours. However, the clock is ticking, and at a select point in time, that option will be expired. Regular service appointments should be made in order to maintain functionality. Yeah, it sounds like indeed they are talking about code, and we can obviously pick up on the fact that it's code. To what extent, we don't really know. But it looks like Maggie's got a choice to make, right? And what does she do? She tells stories. She shapes stories. So does she have a story that she's sitting on that she needs to tell the truth? Does she have a proposed deal? The clock is ticking on something. She needs to make a decision in a certain amount of time, right? And it looks like at a select point in time, that option will be expired. So it looks like Maggie is being given the choice to do the right thing. And doing the right thing sounds like she needs to make an appointment by way of the regular service appointments if she wants to maintain functionality. So it remains to be seen how this works out, but it looks like our favorite deep state knucklehead has her feet to the fire now from the New York Times. Interesting stuff. Those are your Q posts. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who already do that. If you are new to my channel, welcome to you. Please keep in mind that from time to time you will be unclicked, unnotified, and unsubscribed. That's what happens with social media when they don't like what kind of message we're putting out. They just try and keep you from hooking up with me. Now, I said in yesterday's video that at a certain point later this month, I may be more difficult to search. So please join me on one of my alternate channels, Gab, BitChute, Brighteon.com. Those are all down below. My links are down below. Also, my Twitter is IPOT, at IPOT 1776. That's at IPOT 1776. And of course, my email is down below. If you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon link is down below too. And if you're old school and want to send me something, my P.O. box is also down below. All those links are down below. Thanks for listening today. It's been a long one today. Lots to think about. And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more coming in regarding these posts. But I will keep you posted. Pun intended. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay free.